A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, there was a podcast that interviewed a man from Kwantlen First Nation, and that man was Brandon Gabriel, an artist, father, husband, and activist. You are about to embark on a journey of epic proportions. This is the Life of Phys Podcast.
So my name is Brandon Gabriel. I carry an ancestral name, and my ancestral name is Kwantlen, and I am a member of the Kwantlen First Nation, whose unceded traditional territories encompass present-day New Westminster, East Maple Ridge, Langley, North Surrey, parts of Aldergrove, and Mission. I also have ancestry with the Sta'alis Nation and the Shakin Nation in Merritt. So I also have Itlakatmuk ancestry. And I am an artist.
An amazing artist.
Thank you.
Brandon and I were just discussing, the funny thing is, when I was trying to find my birth family, I would ask Brandon questions all the time, like, where do I look? What do I do? And he'd give me advice, and he'd be like, man, it's going to come one day. So I just let Brandon know that day did come. And in a weird roundabout way, we have some ancestry lines that may or may not cross.
Yes.
I am from Lower Nicola, and I am excited to learn my culture, learn my language, and finally have a place to rest my head. You know what I mean? I finally know I have that clarity now of where I'm from. So Brandon, let's get to your art.
Sure.
What got you started on this journey?
Well, I mean, I think my journey started at a very young age. Like, I always think that from like my earliest memories, I just love making art. I recall my first affinity for it was like in color, like Star Wars coloring books. I used to have stacks and stacks of these coloring books, and I remember my grandpa, who was Grand Chief Joe Gabriel from the Kwantlen Nation, and my grandmother Maureen Gabriel. Her maiden name was Joe. She's my one side of my family, but I remember growing up, and on the weekends when I used to go spend my stay overnights at my grandparents' house, my grandpa and grandma would get in their van and take us kids to all the grocery stores or wherever we could find coloring books, and they would buy them all, and they would buy all the coloring books just for me. And I remember, like, it was always, for me, it was just always a place where I felt like anything was possible, that it was my own space, it was safe. And I think it just grew from there. My love of art grew from there. And so I remember when I turned 12 years old, my grandfather, Joe, gave me 2 envelopes, and he's like, in one envelope, there's a guitar and guitar lessons. In the other envelope are a set of paints and painting lessons. And you have to pick one. I remember I picked the one with the art. And I find that interesting because I wonder what my life would have been had I chose this other envelope. And
I had tried to learn the guitar, and I can tell you it would have been full of frustrations.
Yeah, I don't think I would have had the brain for it. Honestly, I don't think I was geared up for that. But anyways, I went for what I always loved, which was to draw and paint. And so that affinity turned into like a serious quest for me. Like, I remember, I don't know, by the time I was like 13 or 14 years old, like which is still very young, but I was absolutely dead set that I was going to be an artist. I knew then at a very young age that I wanted it to be a career. And I worked very hard from that point on to like make sure that everything that I did in my life was geared towards that. And by the time, before I even graduated high school, I remember when I was in grade 9, I was in grade 12 advanced art. Like, that's how far I advanced at a very young age. And like grade 10 art, I was like, they just had me in all these advanced classes, right, from grade 9 all the way to grade 12. But then I just remember like what it was like for me back then. And I just loved being in the art room, making art. I actually remember, like, I was actually making a living. I was already getting paid for my work even before I finished high school. And so then I went on to study at university, eventually going to Emily Carr University of Art and Design. But by the time I had left university, I had left an accomplished artist kind of out the gate. And so it's been quite a journey. It's been lifelong. It's been incredible. There's been a lot of amazing things that have happened in that time, and I've met some amazing people, and I think sort of like the best gift that I got from it was connecting to community. I think I've met some really amazing people along the way, and I've had so many tremendous opportunities as a result of meeting those amazing people. And these people care deeply about who is in their community, how healthy they want their community to be, how they want it to look, and what opportunities they want to give, and so forth, like sort of generally speaking. But yeah, it's been pretty cool.
And I'm fortunate enough to get to see one of your sculptures every single morning on my way to work. Right on the corner of 56th and 200th.
Oh, yeah. Oh, wow. So
I've actually looked up to your art for, I mean, I've known you for, I don't even know how many years now.
Decades.
And there's something about your art that's very powerful.
Thank you.
People that don't know it should check out Brandon Gabriel Arts on Instagram. And I remember you were doing your, I can't remember which journey it was. You were going out on the outskirts of the island and going up. I think you were going towards Alaska.
Yes.
It's a few years ago.
Yes,
and
it was.
I was standing on the Jacob Haldy Bridge, and you were rowing under it. So I have those photos of you coming under it with the helicopter above you. And they were drumming and singing in the square there. And the vibrations that were coming and the power that was coming off of you going under, and the drummers and singers drumming and singing, the vibrations through the bridge that were running through my body. That was the first time I really knew that I had to learn more, because for my whole life, I didn't know where I was from. I had got little tidbits. You're from here, Minnesota. Yeah. You're from Klamath Falls in Oregon. So I was never sure. I didn't know where to look. I was told my whole life that don't tell anybody you're an Indian because they'll treat you different. And that stuck. It stuck with me till I was in my 30s. But that moment where they were singing and you guys were paddling under, that changed my life. That energy, it made me realize how important it was to learn my culture, how important it was for me to share that culture with my children. And I've never felt more welcome than I have in that moment, or when you guys came into Simiamu on one of the journeys, and I got invited into a circle, and I got to hear. I was still to this day, I'm blown away by how welcoming everybody's been to me.
Oh man, that's so powerful. Thank you for sharing that. Like that journey was, I think it was in 2014. We paddled from Fort Langley on the Fraser River, and our destination was Metlakatla, Alaska, which was for a 1,400 kilometer journey up the entire coast of British Columbia. And I remember the purpose was to bring awareness to the threat that oil pipelines were having on the coast. At that time, we're still in their proposal phases. And I remember there were two pipelines that were being proposed. One was Trans Mountain, and then the other one was Enbridge. And at that time, the more immediate threat to coastal waters and life on the coast was Enbridge. There were calls from nations along the coast to get people to do something, have teach-ins, do fundraisers to help raise legal funds for the nations that were impacted by these proposals, get involved with your local nonprofits and things like that to help do your part in your part of the coast. And I remember, like, at that time of my life, you know, I was still like, I think I didn't have children yet. I just started dating my future wife, Melinda.
I remember dating her.
Yeah. But up until then, you know, like I was, you know, I had gone through a lot of difficult times in my life prior to that too. Like I remember I had struggled with trauma and addictions, and I was just in my early stages of recovery too at that point in my life too. So there was, like, for me, there was a lot of important changes that were occurring spiritually, emotionally, mentally, physically. But I remember being approached by the group of people that were wanting to do this canoe journey up the coast. And they sent me this invitation. They're like, do you want to come? And I was like, well, how long is it going to take? Like, it's probably going to take like 70 or 80 days at least. And it's going to be like physically arduous. You're going to be tested, but it'll be worth it. And I think at that time, one of the reasons they had wanted me to be part of it was because of my reach in the art world. Even though I was going through a difficult time in my life, my work had reached a certain level of notoriety at that time that I could draw attention into what we were doing. And I think that was one of the reasons why they had wanted me to become part of this odyssey. But, I remember the day that I left, when you were describing us going under the bridge, I remember seeing you standing on the bridge with your camera. I remember it. And so, like, okay, what was going on in my mind? Like, I was thinking, once I go under this bridge, that's crossing the line. Like, that's like the committal line. Like, there's no turning back after you cross the bridge. You know what I mean? So, like, it was a pivotal moment in my life, and it was very emotional for me too, because we could hear the echo of the thundering drums under the bridge, and it was like a booming like sound that was like you just felt it in your whole body. And I could hear the chopper whirring above, like the helicopter sound, like that was loud and booming, but it was not as loud and booming as the drums that were on the beach, on the riverbank. Like they were just, and I remember like just how powerful that was. And I remember thinking to myself, I was like, I wonder when the last time a Kwantlen person, if at all, had made their way to Alaska on a trip like that. Like I had to think about it, and I was like, I'm wondering if anyone's ever done this, right? Like from my nation. Then I started thinking, I'm like, I don't know if anybody ever had to, because like there was no recorded history of any of our people going on a mission to try and bring awareness or save the coast from ecological calamity. And so, I mean, like that's something that really weighed really heavy on my mind at that time when I left. And it really meant a lot. Like the emotional impact of it was huge. On that journey, I met so many people along the way. And, when you're out there on the water, you meet other people who are on different kinds of journeys. You know what I mean? Like, and, I met a few people who were like on kayak journeys, or they were canoeing from Vancouver to Gibsons, or Gibsons to Seashell, or places like that. They were doing these little mini odysseys, you know what I mean? And you get to hear what's going on. Like for some, they're like, they lost a mother, or they lost a father or a sibling, or they're starting a new chapter in their lives and they were needing clarity. So they got aboard their canoe or their kayak or their sailboat or whatever to go on these journeys. And then I thought, wow, that's a really big deal what they're doing, and I got to meet these people, but they were all they're like, well, we hope you're safe. We hope everything is going to be okay for you on this journey. Not realizing that I had like weeks and weeks of paddling ahead of me. And it was incredible. It was that experience was life-changing for me. For one, it helped me measure what I thought, because there were times in my life when I thought I was defeated, where I couldn't go on any further, where I didn't have the energy or the will to continue on doing what I was doing. And after doing something like that and proving to myself that, well, hey, man, you just paddled 1,300 kilometers from Fort Langley across the entire coastline of British Columbia to Prince Rupert, which is where we ended. We didn't go to Metlakatla because of weather conditions, and our crew succumbed to the flu at that time. So the last 150 kilometers or so we couldn't do because it would have been too treacherous. But we were so proud of how far we made it, and also acknowledging not many other people have done that. Not many other people could ever say that they paddled in a canoe for that distance for as long as we did. And it was a total of 80 days that we were out there. And I remember just feeling like after that, I just felt like nothing could stop me from doing what I wanted to do. That whatever goals I put in front of myself from that day forward, I could always take the hardest day on that path and compare it to the hardest days of this journey that I just did, that I completed, and say that I can do it. And that's how important that was for me. It was a big deal.
It shows you your inner strength. So first of all, Brandon,
Yes.
I want to congratulate you and say how proud I am of you for your being able to overcome and recover.
Thank you.
I'm grateful that you took that journey on. And now that you said that you felt a release of energy, maybe that helped that energy flow through me, that I felt, that made me know that I had to be more a part of the community. That's what the Life of Phys podcast is all about. It's about showing people that we all have mental struggles and we can overcome them through creativity, no matter what your art form is, whether it's speaking, carving, painting, beading, dancing. For me, it's photography, skateboarding, snowboarding, riding a BMX bike. There's creative outlets everywhere that can help you through some of the hardest times in your life.
Yeah.
It's so important to share your story. It's just so important to let others understand how beautiful Indigenous culture is and how welcoming it is. People always talk about how, you can't go there. They're not welcoming.
Yeah.
What are you talking? And they'll feed you. They'll take care of you. They'll offer you shelter. They'll give you clothes off their back. Like, it's the most welcoming communities around.
Yes.
And I'm hoping by having this conversation with you, Brandon, I appreciate it. You are a friend of mine. Mm-hmm. And we go back a ways. Yeah. I'm hoping this will open the door for more Indigenous creatives to feel comfortable coming on and sharing their journey with me. I want to bring a spotlight to community.
Yeah. I mean, I think even just you framing what you're doing, because when I saw your tagline for this podcast, right away I thought, oh man, he's bringing all that stuff together. Like, that's brilliant. It's all connected. Our recovery from genocide, the playing field that was left for us, and the lack of resources. It wasn't because there's always been a lack of resources to help our communities through things. It was literally robbed from us, and we've been in this constant recovery process, and the system that aided in the collapse of our systems is not capable of helping us recover it. Like, the beautiful thing about that is that we are the ones who can do it. And I always think that we're always going to have our best answers. We have the answer for how we're going to make our way through things. And I think we need people who can model it. I think that's important. Like, people who can model recovery or model resilience. And I think there's a lot of people who do it. And I just don't think there's a lot of spotlight on it. And so, like, we need those spotlights. We need that to be shone on. We need to be the ones who shine it on ourselves, I think. That's for certain. As part of my journey as an artist, so too is the story of my life, which, I grew up in the Kwantlen First Nation community in Fort Langley. And because you're a child and that's just how things are, you don't recognize the treacherous environment that we were actually growing up in, unless you step outside of it for a little while and kind of reflect on it and be like, oh, hey, man, like, we were actually in a really vulnerable place. Like, we were actually in a really vulnerable situation as a community, and we were constantly up against uphill battles against the powers that be, which completely enveloped the metropolis that was growing around us, which was growing as a result of our genocide, even though we had no idea at that time, because nobody was given the vocabulary to even be allowed to speak about genocide without having some repercussions about it if you did. And that's how oppressive the state was to our community. And so, like, my recollection of my community growing up was that there definitely was a stark contrast between the Indigenous community that I was in and the non-Indigenous community that was surrounding us. And the most obvious difference was the wealth. That even though there was a lot of blue collar, working class, like non-Indigenous folks that were around us, they still had, in contrast to us, markedly more wealth than the people in my community who were just as hardworking. I never really understood why. It was a question that didn't really come up that often. I never really asked that. But inside the community, there were all kinds of chaos that was occurring that nobody else around us was seeing. There was abject poverty, like really poor infrastructure, and when growing up inside of it, you just think that, well, the water's not running today, okay, or, well, the heat's not on today, oh, okay, but everybody's house was like that, like it was just like, or the insulation in the homes were so bad that homes were just never kept in heat, or they never kept out the cold, or they were always hot, or whatever. Those kind of things were just like, you just kind of faced them, and not really knowing that there was a disparity from one side of the water to the other, and so there was all kinds of violence inside the community. There was all kinds of abject poverty. There was a lack of infrastructure, but I think the biggest thing were lack of opportunities, and so if you grew up in a community, you were either going to be a fisher person, or you were going to be helping on the farm as a farmhand, haying bales, or bales of hay, or feeding cattle, or chopping down brush to clear the way for more grazing. But in general, life in the community just meant that you worked hard, but you only had a couple choices to choose from. And I think one choice was definitely not an artist. If there were art makers in the community, and there were, who were all very talented, they were still treated as though they were manual laborers. They were not treated as people who made precious items and were paid the big bucks to make those works. It was just like manual labor. Artists, there were plenty of artists, but there was no hope in hell that what we were going to be, what artists were going to make, at least the ones who I was watching when I was growing up, were going to be able to make a living doing what they're doing. And so I remember that being a reality in our community, but I think, as I grew older into adolescence and moved on to high school, and I kind of formed, society kind of took over, and I started having a stronger sense of the world around me and a stronger sense of injustice, it really dawned on me just how impoverished our community was in all aspects, not just economically, but holistically. Health, our health was not as good as anybody else's, and so and so I think there were a lot of people who weren't able to access services to care for their mental health or their holistic health at all, and that's the era we grew up in, and that's where I come from. And so it's only up until recently, and I'm going to say maybe the last 15, possibly 20 years, not even that, I'm going to say about 15 years, where there's been a conscientious effort to recognize the displacement that's been, the multi-generational displacement caused by genocide and colonization. And people are just now, recently, starting to access some of these important avenues of redress, which includes looking after one's mental health, or looking at trauma recovery, or looking at holistic healing models designed by the community to help these generations come through this horrendous epoch, this time, this era. And so it's always on my mind. That is never lost on me when I do my work. And so as I make my art, one of the things that I remember, I was fortunate enough to go to a place like Emily Carr as an art student. But what it showed me, I think what the most important thing that it showed me who I am and what I care about, and what kind of art means something to me. And I think one of the things that I became cognizant of while I was a student there was that non-Indigenous art, from a Western perspective, tends to focus on intellectual pursuits, like intellectual inquiry, art that makes people think, art that is very academic, comes from specific schools of thought and styles and things of that nature, and tries to advance itself through its intellectual prowess. Whereas I really find that Indigenous art, its purpose and what it's trying to do generally is doing something that's a lot different. I think that Indigenous art is trying to make people feel. It's trying to make connections from not just intellectually, but holistically, from cosmological, the cosmological forces, the present day, and then looking at history, and then looking at some of these, like looking at stories, how we tell stories. And I think it's what the world is. Maybe the world doesn't know that it's what it needs, but I think it's what it needs. And I think that's why our art is so important right now. And I think that's why it's always been important. And I think it's important for us to create forums where art can be discussed, or our ideas can be discussed. Because I think our people need to be given as much opportunity as possible to feel.
I think it's so important people look into the history of Indigenous artists and see that some of the greatest pieces have been created through that pain and trauma, and the strength and the message that it carries. You know, like I did that photo of Siwash Rock that,
Yes.
Or my inspiration was Roy Henry Vickers.
Mm-hmm.
And then he reached out to me wanting to paint my image to do
Ah.
a retake. And I'm like,
Yeah.
pardon me?
Yeah.
Wow. Just him even reaching out was huge.
Yeah.
But I do have something I want to throw out that I'm thinking. This is a project I want to work on in some Indigenous communities. I don't know how to do it yet, but here's what I'm thinking, Brandon. I've got a camera company. They make cameras that are simple. I'd like to get involved somehow in the communities with the kids. I would like to provide cameras and let them have them for 30 days, capturing the community, and then all meet up and look at the images and just to see the creativity through the eyes of the children. And this is something I'd love to do with you, work with you on this somehow, and just somehow let people see the behind the scenes of the community, those things that people don't see on the outside. The one thing that bothers me so much is the stereotypes that are out there about our people. It frustrates me. It's hurtful. Even before I knew where I was always an ally.
Yeah.
You in general are super important to my partner, Tara. As you know, you've known her forever.
Yeah.
You were instrumental in her being named. And she loves the Kwantlen community. She loves the people of Kwantlen. She loves the kids from Kwantlen. And I'm trying to just find a way that I can connect with communities all across Canada and capture moments that people don't see. So that's just something. You can keep that in the back of your head, and maybe we can.
I'd love to. I mean, it just so happens that I just received a grant from the First Peoples Cultural Council for a mentorship program. And I think you and I should talk about it, because my goal with that was to use carving as the method. My goal isn't to train carvers and mill out carvers, but my goal is to create informed artists, to create artists who are informed about. We have these historical collective traumas that we're saddled with. And it doesn't matter which generation we're talking about. I mean, it could be any living generation that is present right now in our communities. And each generation has its own different saddle bag of traumas that we are bestowed with. And we need to have toolkits, I believe. And I don't think there's one universal toolkit that we should all be given. But we should all learn how to use tools. sometimes it's different for like some people. It might be easier for them to click a button than it is to scrape wood shavings off a piece of wood, or to put globs of paint on a brush, and so forth and so forth. The more tools that we have that we can use as we traverse the world and try to find our way through it, the better we're going to be able to handle these enormous responsibilities and these enormous tasks that we're saddled with. And they're just not easy to deal with individually. I just don't think it's possible for any single person to take on genocide by themselves. And that's what it is, right? And so and I think it's helpful. I think your idea is great. I would love to work with you on that. I think that's something that I'm definitely, we need to talk about.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I want to also, we've talked in the past, if you have any events that you want a photographer to be at, to capture moments for you, please let me know. And if I have the time in my schedule, I will be there, because connecting with community I got 49 years to make up for. I was born and built a warrior. I was born to carry the weight of people who can't carry it themselves. And I always have this connection with my Indigenous culture, that I was brought here to meet people like yourself and help form some way that we can help the next generation know that they're strong enough, they're good enough, and nothing in this world is going to break them. The only thing that will break them is themselves. So I look at things, I tell my kids, like, my kids are Seashell. They're from Seashell First Nation.
Yeah.
And I always say to them, like, yeah, we've had some shit. We've had some bad things happen for us.
Yeah.
But man, if you got extra trauma, if you got extra worries, pile them on my shoulders. Let me deal with them, And I think if we build a community, especially a community of artists that are using their hands, their eyes, their thought, their words, man, I think the next generation's unstoppable.
I agree. I agree. So much with that. I'm carving. I'm doing an art installation at a school in Langley right now, and there was a group of young carvers. Well, they weren't carvers when they showed up, but we call them carvers now that we've been working with them. But when they first showed up, they identified as Indigenous students, and so we actually spent a day where we just kind of sat in a circle and kind of let everybody just talk and just say, like, I just very loosely just said, if you can say your name, and if you know the meaning of your name, and if you have an ancestral name too, you can say it, and just tell us about yourself. And if you know where your family's from, share it. If not, it's okay. You don't have to say it if you don't want to, but just tell us what you're hoping, what gift you hoping to get from us, and what gift you're going to leave behind for us, in that sort of order of things. And it was a good exercise. But then this one young girl spoke, and she was grade 9, and she just, like, because I explained who I was, I went through I'll start first, and so, like, I did my spiel, and I gave them a lot to work with, like, in terms of how they could respond. And it gets to this one young girl, she's in grade 9, and she's like, well, I'm so-and-so, and I'm from this nation, and I think we're related. And I go, oh, well, who's your parents? Names your parents. I'm like, I know your parents. And then I'm like, yeah, I mean, they are related. So like we found out that her grandpa and my grandpa were siblings.
Oh wow! Well, it's just kind of like we discussed earlier, like,
yeah, and so, like,
between us.
And so I was like, oh wow, like, you're really closely related. And then she's like, and I'm very excited to be here, and I don't know what gift I'm going to bring, except I'm just curious. And I was like, that's good enough. That's all you need. Like, that's all you need with me. That's all you got to bring, and I can work with that, right? And I go, like, what are you hoping to leave behind? Like, and then she's like, well, I hope to leave calm and peacefulness with the group. I was like, man, we need so much of that. Like, you know what I mean? Like growing up in environments that were chaotic, constantly chaotic or violent, and then having this young person coming forward, sharing who they are with a group of strangers, talking about their family and their connection to me, but then also offering some like peacefulness. That was huge for me. Like I was very emotional about that. Like I was just like, oh yes, thank you. Like, oh, that is such a gift. I go, man, like even just meeting you is a gift, you know? And so, but then in the same space, there were students who were talking. They both came from distant lands, came from Saskatchewan, but they both arrived in very different circumstances. You know, one was their mom and dad split up. They came out here with their dad because dad had to go find a job. He found a job out here, so they moved here. But then the other one was put in the foster care system for whatever reasons, and their foster parents live here. And so they came to the school and they were talking, and as it turns out, they're relatives. And like these two relatives found each other in this space. And then I thought, well, that's huge. Like imagine that a situation where you're separated from your family, like yourself, for whatever reason, and the system snags you, takes you away to a distant land, and you have to make a new identity for yourself in that space in order to survive. And you get there and you find your relative.
Wow. Can you imagine?
and they're in our space carving together.
That's incredible.
And they know that carving isn't part of their culture, their tradition, but it's just a reason for them to gather. And for me, I was just like, that's good enough for me. Like, I was like, if you want to pick up a knife and help us carve this masterpiece, by all means, you'll get recognition for your helping us. But if you want to spend time with each other and get to know each other, even better. Right. And so, I mean, like, those are things that I never count on ever. Like going back to that journey that I was on in 2014. And so there was this crazy rainstorm that kicked up when we were approaching a place called Squirrel Cove. And it was just this massive weather system that came rolling in. And the Coast Guard that was trailing us, our canoe, because the Coast Guard was aware of our presence in our canoe on those waters. Their big red boat comes barreling up beside our canoe and said, hey, there's a storm coming in that's pretty serious, guys. You better find shelter and get off the water because it's treacherous. Like, it could be life-threatening. And so we did a call out on the radio and just said who we were and we're looking for shelter. And then there was somebody from an Indigenous community that answered, like, hey, this is Chief so-and-so. There's a chief from the nation. Said, we have soup for you guys and a hot shower. Come to shore and we'll come greet you. And so we did. So we get to this place called Squirrel Cove. And sure enough, there was this small group of elders that were there, and they were all wearing their blankets, like their regalia, and they had their drums, and they were drumming us into the beach. It was so beautiful. Like, it was just the coolest thing. And, you know, complete strangers, right? And we get there. We say our names. I said my name, who I'm from, where I'm, like, my family name, where I'm from, and the reason we're on this journey and where we're going, and that we were coming to shore to ask for a place to stay until the storm blows over. And they welcomed us. And then this little elder steps forward and she goes, you said you're a Gabriel from Kwantlen? I go, yeah. She's like, did you know Alfred? And we're on the beach, you know, like this is in front of, like, you know, there's cameras and there's the chief and whatever. And I go, that was my great grandfather. And then she was like, I used to play cards with him and your great grandma. Come on in, we'll tell you all about it, right? And so, like, go get cleaned up. We go for dinner, and I get to talking to her, and she tells me her name, what family she's from. She's Stolo, so she's from our territories. And in the 1960s, when the government was scooping children to take them into custody, either for adoption or foster care or into the residential school system, she got on a boat, a fishing boat, and fled the Fraser River and just kept going until she found a safe place for her and her children to land. And they landed in this village that we went to. And she stayed in this village. This was in the 1960s. And she ends up falling in love with a man from the community. And they end up getting married, and they had more children. So she just stayed. I thought, oh, that's amazing. And then I go, how do you know my great grandparents? She's like, before I fled, I used to go play cards with them on Saturday nights. And your great grandma used to make cookies. She used to bake bread, and we used to smoke cigars and play cards. And I have fond memories of them. And she goes, and she's like, I've been here since it was 1966 or 67. So this is 2013. So I don't know, but it's like 50 years or something. How many years is that? 40? No. That was almost near close to 50 years she had been there. And she goes, I never looked back. She's like, I never went back to my home community. And she was like, in all my years, when I was homesick, I used to come down to the water, to the shore, and pray that somebody from my Stola community would come see me. And that prayer was never answered until today.
Wow, that's amazing.
And I was like, oh God, I was bawling. I was like, oh,
I bet.
I was like, oh my God. I go, and then she was like, and it's the great grandson of my friend. She was like, never thought I would see this day. And you'll have to meet my daughter and my grandchildren and my great grandchildren who are part of this nation now. And so I did. The next day, we stayed there for 2 nights because that's how long the storm was. But when we left the village, she brought her entire family with her. They were all dressed in regalia, and they all drummed us out of the community as we went on our journey.
What an amazing, amazing connection.
Isn't it?
Oh, I'm goosebumped, man.
There's been so many instances in my life where I've crossed paths with somebody, and the interaction, not only was it just like meaningful, but profound. And I always just think, wow, I made the right choice. Like, I was thinking back to my grandpa giving me the envelopes, right? Like how fateful that was. And I was like, I wonder what would have happened if I chose a different envelope. And given such a big choice at such a young age too. But also it really gave credence to how important it is to be a good mentor for young people. Because even at a young formative age, our young people are making decisions that will have impacts later on in life, and our mentorship is so important. And it really made me think about all that. I always think about those things, and so those are just some of the things that I've come to experience in my life as an artist. And I think I need to start writing some of it. I journal some of this stuff, but not all of it. But I mean, it definitely would be journal worthy. It could be a book one day. I don't know. I think my journeys definitely could be a book one day because of all the people I've interacted with. And I'm not sure what our time is, but
there's no time limit on.
Good.
I'm up to posting. The next one that comes out is 2 hours long.
Okay.
Because it's about telling a story. It's not just about getting you on just to get a little bit of information. I want people to know who you are. I want people to know what you're about, because I've noticed a lot of the younger generation of Indigenous people.
Yeah.
They don't all have that pride in being an Indigenous person.
It's true.
And I would love, with this mentor program that you're talking about, which I'm 100% in, 100%. I would love to tell my story about how I grew up from the 70s, when I was born in 74, all the way up until my 47th, it's either after, just before my 47th birthday, when we found my birth mother and then my birth father on the same day.
Wow.
You know, I want to share the stresses and the struggles of my personal journey.
Yeah.
But I also want to share my gift behind the camera with future generations. Because could you imagine, even when Kwantlen's cleaning fish?
Yeah.
Right? Somebody's there, they're capturing the hands with the knife and the fish. That's moments that people on the outside never see.
No. And
right?
those are so important. And I mean, so like when I did my training as an artist, so like I have background in painting, drawing, illustration, graphic design, photography is one of my backgrounds, sculpture, and I've been on this journey plying my way, trying all these different things, and like they're different processes. Like they all have different processes, and what I love about photography is that it's kind of like in the right hands with the right eye and the right creative person behind the camera, you can capture inner worlds, like worlds within worlds, and it can be very poignant and meaningful, and like the textures too. Like it's just really amazing. And I still use photography as the principal way in which I construct an image. And so it's still part of my practice, but it's not sort of the end product. But I use what I learned in photography and how to construct an image. My compositions are all based on teachings from photographs using the frame. And what I love about your work is that, because I think you're a brilliant photographer.
I appreciate that.
Is the textures that you cap? The textures are just so rich. The lighting and the colors and the composition are also very rich too. But the content, like the stories you're telling, there's something happening in them. Like they're doing something, and that's what I always love. And there's been a few images that you've created over the years that I'd be like, oh man, I would love to paint that. Like I'll be like, oh, that one looks like it could be a really good painting. and so that part of my practice is something that I've not had that much time to do. And you know, and how my work has happened to me is it's really organic. So like I remember like somebody's like, oh, can you do murals? I'm like, sure, I'll go do a mural. But then I'll get like 10 people that want a mural. Then that's all I'm doing for the next 2 or 3 years. And then somebody's like, oh, do you carve? I'm like, yeah, I carve. I just haven't been doing it. I've been busy doing murals. Like, well, can you do a carving for me for this? I'm like, sure. And I'll go do the carving. And then I got like 10 carvings I got to do. And then it's like all these, that's all I'm doing for the next little while. And it's only been until recently where I've reached I've reached a pinnacle in my career where I can enlist the help of other talented people to come and help me. And they can be part of our team, which allows me some wiggle room to sort of delve into these other things that I've been waiting in the wings for. And so it's kind of an exciting time too. So like, and what right now kind of where I like, there's a number of different pursuits that are going on all at once because of that. But sort of the principal focus of my practice right now is monumental public art, creating these larger than life spectacles where my work is being integrated into these, you know, massive sculptural pieces, which is part of what I've always wanted to do. Like I've always been wanting to make something larger than life that's spectacular, that draws people in, that takes up actual physical space. But they take teams of people to do. It's a monumental like undertaking, and I'm really grateful for that. And by way of that, I'm also starting to get into some set and costume design for film and television production as well. So,
oh wow,
I never thought I'd end up there, and that was kind of really. That was kind of interesting how that all came about too. But here I am, you know, and it's been quite it's been quite something. I'm amazed at I'm amazed at I'm amazed at what we do only when I get time to breathe and reflect on things. But while I'm doing it, while I'm doing all these projects, I don't think of sort of everything on this grand spectacular scale. I'm just thinking of doing a good job. Like my training as an artist has always been like I just want to make it. I just want to do a really good job on what I do, and that's my focus, and that'll be my focus until it's over. And then I'll look back and be like, oh wow, man, we really did a good job on that. Like, and then I'll hear the accolades that come too, which I'm very grateful for too. Like, it's not been an easy go for sure. There's been a lot of hard work. There's been a lot of failures. There's been a lot of booby traps. There's been all kinds of things that have been thrown in our path that could have curtailed my career, and it could have stopped a long time ago. But we persevered and we continued to do so. And it's just kind of a cool thing to be part of a lot of the time. And
sorry to cut you off there. I know when I see an article pop up about you and your next project, I'm always cheering for you.
Yeah,
I love it because this is the first year with my art, and like this podcast. This has been an idea for 2 years, and I've just been afraid to do it. I've just been wondering, like, self-doubt, I guess. A lot of self-doubt. A lot of, is my work good enough to be out there? And I recorded my first episode with a local photographer named Alfonso Villan. He had a really cool story, and it sat there in the upload queue on Spotify, and I was like, nope. For probably half a day, I kept looking at it going, nope, I'm not going to do it. It's not good enough. And then I told myself, I'm like, the only way you know if it's going to work is if you click that button. So I clicked it. I let everybody know, okay, first one's up. And the response has been incredible. I've got artists of all different genres that are coming on. My big focus, though, is bringing Indigenous artists to the front, giving them a platform to share their story, learning about their communities from them, because I'm old and I'm now learning about my community.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anything that I could do to grow in the Indigenous communities in Canada is something that I want to put my passion in. And I'm starting to learn that if I believe in the Creator and I believe in the gifts that I was given, that I can be very successful with that. It's tough when you're questioning yourself your whole life, because on one hand, you're hiding who you are because people will treat you different. And on the other hand, your other half, I'm half Norwegian. So I'm the whitest of the white. So I skated that line of privilege. I had the white privilege, but the soul of an Indigenous warrior. Mm-hmm. So it was a very hard battle. And especially as I got older, because I've always been drawn to Indigenous art, Indigenous drumming especially. There's something in the beat of those drums. I can't not stop and just take it in. Mm. So I battled this fine line of, is it time to just be who I am supposed to be? Or am I going to stick behind this 30 plus years of being told that don't tell anybody? And it's such a messed up thing.
Yeah.
But when I figured out where I was from, and the fact that for some reason in this world, I moved to Canada and my community's 2 hours away, like, I was meant to be here. I was meant for this journey, this struggle, and everything. I was meant to pile it on and just keep moving forward. So I just really appreciate, you sharing your story, and, sharing that your struggles and questioning yourself. 'Cause I see your success. I see, you're creating this thing for your children to be like, my dad did that. That must be such a cool feeling. It must be so cool when your daughter or your son see that you man, my dad did that.
Yeah.
Like, that must be so cool. And I want to create something that is tangible. I don't want my photos to be forgotten. I want to create art. I want 30 to 40 years from now, I want people to be able to look at my work on a wall in a museum.
Yeah.
I want to capture history. I feel like I was born in the wrong era. I feel like but if I was like 50s, 60s, or even old working class Vancouver, the backgrounds that I would have been, that's my texture. That's my gritty, my old that I love to shoot. But now I'm just going to recreate it, and I'm going to work with yourself, and I'll work with communities, and I'll just start capturing the moments that actually have meaning. So again, thank you. You always inspire me. So I just wanted to jump in there and let you know before the thoughts disappeared.
Thank you for saying all that, because okay, so I don't know how many interviews I've done over the years. I've done so many, and not all of them I was happy about. Usually because the question asker never did any homework or didn't have any idea about who I was, and that's the approach they would take when they would interview me, and they'd always come to me when I was achieving something. But it, in a way, those interviews were like they did what they were supposed to, which was giving the who, what, where, when, and why of who I was. But it was always like starting fresh. Like it was always like reintroducing myself. And it always happened at a time when I was achieving something. When I outside of that interview, I felt like that I was doing something that was adding to the who, what, where, when, and why of me. But the people asking me the questions didn't really care one way or another what I even thought about what they were doing. And it was very transparent and one-dimensional to me. And so over the years, I've kind of I've just cared less about what those people have to say when they're not coming to me and kind of doing their homework, but I mean, when I look back on, I feel like I'm a seasoned vet now at what I do, that I've been doing this for so long now that it's just, to me, it's just, I just do it. You know what I mean? It's like breathing. But I mean, I feel like I've come to a place with it. I feel like I've reached the pinnacle. I feel like I've accomplished something. And I have a family that's a big part of it. Like my wife, Melinda, is a huge part of what I do. And I wouldn't, if I didn't have her support throughout the last decade, there would be somebody else standing here doing what I'm doing. It would just be a different person doing it. I wouldn't be me. Her support is tremendous, and it means everything to me. And what I love about our union is that we have children, and those children are a big part of what we do. And we bring them into these spaces where I'll bring my kids into interviews with me now because I have no other choice, because I don't have a caregiver around me, and I'm looking after my kids. And so I'll be doing an interview, then one of them will interrupt me because they want, my daughter Jamie, who's turning 8 now, she's been coming to workspaces with me ever since she was 18 months. And I've let her paint. I've let her draw. She has sketchbooks and posters in my studio that are just hers. She's been a big part of coming into these spaces. And now, even at 7 years old, she's helped me paint some murals that I worked on. And art is so important to her. And she's totally into the way different things than I was when I was a kid. I was into Star Wars. That was my number one thing. Hers are unicorns and witches and magic and fantasy. She's really into those things. When she was 4 and 5 years old, any mural that she saw in Vancouver, she thought was mine. Any mural. Dad, look, there's your mural. And I look at it yeah. because I knew it wasn't mine.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to break it to her that it wasn't. And I was like, "What do you think?" She's like, "Oh, I love it." I go, "Good." And I didn't want to take the magic away from her, because to me, I could just see the magic in her eyes. You know what I mean? And I thought, well, what a shitty dad I'd be if I took that from her, and I didn't want to take that from her, and so I just let it be. And same thing with carvings. She would see house poles carved anywhere, Stanley Park. It doesn't matter. She thought they were mine, but I just felt honored that she was associating these landmark art pieces with me, and I just let it be. Like I just thought, I'm gonna let that sit there. And I'm glad I did, because today she knows what is mine. She's cognizant of what I can do, and it's still magical to her, and she looks forward to coming to these events. And my son Isidore, who's turning 4 this year, he's a little less concerned about those details. He's just excited to be running around in the space, and if I give him a paintbrush and a piece of paper to draw on, he's really happy. And it's similar. It's a very similar occurrence, and I just love having my children there. And it really changed everything. I mean, it also changed the way I create too, because I'm in the early stages of my life, I was really just all about myself, and making sure that I had my needs met. And now I have a responsibility to make sure that my children are clothed, fed, and housed, and cared for, and loved. And it changes how I create in a big way. And I think for the better too. I just think it just changed the reason why I get up in the morning, and it just expanded. And I'm just happy to do that. And it's just wonderful to be part of this life that I'm in, and I get to live, and doing these big projects that I'm working on, and bringing my children into those spaces, and meeting all these really cool people.
That's amazing. And I know community is huge.
Yeah.
Community is everything. And I know there's always struggles in a community, so we don't have to get into that unless you feel like it. I don't know much about community. I know about doing things solo. You know what I mean? I'd never felt like I was part of a community before. And then 9 months ago, I started trying to push this whole community over competition aspect of my business, where I'd rather help people be successful than try to be anything near what they call a gatekeeper. I'm learning every day. Every day that I wake up, I'm learning, whether it's this podcast, whether it's taking a different type of photo that I'm not used to taking. Any way that I create, it's something new. And that's been an amazing ride for me. Do you find it hard to get all of the youth or all of the people from your community together and trying to see the greater good?
Yes. It's always been a challenge. And so, my community is no different than any other community. We were not spared the onslaught of colonization. And I do recognize that there's a lot of people from outside the community that recognize Kwantlen as kind of a beacon of light, and how it functions, the people in it, and the roles they play, and how they do it, and how it looks to the community. But there are still many pieces of it that are still heaped in pain and suffering from colonization, and it's still visible every day when you're in the community. And a lot of the need for healing has not been met collectively. And I recognize that, and deduce that it's like that for other creatives that are trying to harness creative energy in their communities to get people more involved. And there's so many barriers. Like, there's just so many barriers for people within the community, just from the get-go, like from the time they get up in the morning to when they get ready to go to work, or they're getting ready to go to school, or getting their children ready. There's just so many holistic barriers that are in their path while they're just doing those basic things. It's hard to try and wade through that and get involvement in a lot of ways, notwithstanding that there's political divisions that exist in the community, like intergenerational political divisions too. And all of that compounded makes it very difficult to get people engaged. And what I'm finding is the best approach to sort of overcome those challenges is to approach things from the educational perspective, where you don't get involvement from like those government officiates or the government officials. You kind of just have to keep them off to the side respectfully and reach the core through the people who are on the ground working in the field of education, because they tend to have already overcome that initial sort of barrier, doing the frontline work of ensuring people are getting their educational needs met. It doesn't have to be politicized. It doesn't have to be heaped in sort of these holistic collective traumas that we've been saddled with. And I think once you kind of crack that and crack it open, and you're dealing with things in that way, you're going to get a lot more people coming to you. Because I also think people want to feel like they're learning some skill or some sort of something that's going to help them move past the barriers they've been facing. I totally think it's doable. And I also think people can smell a fate. And so like if somebody is coming to the community with intention and they want to get engagement because it ticks off a box for their funding apparatus or how they structure their financial supports or of some kind, that's funding things, or for as an example. And if people see that it's a shallow attempt to engage with them, they won't show. So I think people have a very strong sense of what authenticity is. Like if your intention is authentic and you're coming with a good heart and a good mind, and they see that's what it is, they'll come, they'll show up, they'll make an effort. And that energy and that intention needs to stay intact for the entire engagement, however long that's going to be. And you need to be able to have the endurance to do it. So I think those are some key elements that don't often get talked about. And I've seen people come and go. Like I've seen people come with intentions and good ideas, but it didn't land. And it didn't land because I think people didn't feel like it was good for them. And I think it goes back to that whole thing about making art that makes people feel, right? It's like I think that's the focus. Us artists and the people who are wanting to make changes need to focus on when we do that work. That's my 2 cents on that.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
It's always important to be authentic with your approach on anything, especially art-based. Because if you're not authentic with what you're doing, people can read between the lines.
Yeah.
They can see it. It's like when someone asks me can you write me a description of your photo? And I'm like, no. You look at the photo and you tell me what it means to you. Because I shoot what I feel. I don't shoot for a purpose.
Yeah.
I shoot what catches my eye, which gives me the finished product of what I visioned. It's hard to explain. It's hard to write down what it means. So I'm hoping that my photos, whether it's a powerful moment, whether it's an artistic moment, that people can read and come to their own conclusion on what that image means to them. And that's how I want to build a legacy. I think if people have to describe their artwork, it's hard to make a lasting legacy because things change and those words change. They don't mean the same thing in 10 years. Whereas if you can create your own vision of what this painting means, it's never going to go out.
I agree. I mean, I think like going back to my art school days, and I remember budding artists who had amazing talent, and when they would put their finished work on the gallery space, on the gallery wall, and they would attach their artist statement to it, and it was like this very Like it was like a manifesto they were posting beside it that was like extremely hard vocabulary, using abstract concepts to describe the thing that we're looking at. And it was described for us that the viewers tended to just walk away from the didactic, that manifesto, and not read it. And when they would leave it, they would also walk away from the art too. It wasn't just like you take the art and leave the manifesto aside. It was like this didactic thing actually was enough reason for people to walk away from the space entirely, because they were read to, they were given instructions on how to view this thing, and the instructions were incredibly hard to understand. And so my read on people in general, is, and I've learned this over time, is that most people are just trying to make it through their day. Like most people are just surviving the day, and most people have tremendous stressors that are impacting how they move in their day. Like the biggest one is money and housing and food and transportation and childcare. And like for a lot of people, that's what's on their mind. And they can't be bothered by looking at something that's so abstract or so conceptual or so scholarly that they just don't get it. And people don't like to be made to feel stupid either. And so if your art is sincere, and you're giving people space to decipher it in their own way for 3 seconds or 30 seconds or 3 minutes or 3 hours, that it should be easy for them to grasp, and they should be able to get it like in a few seconds, about what they're looking at and how it makes them feel. And the synthesization of how they think about it will come after those two things happen. And I think that's the order of things when people are looking at art. One of the things that I'm very cognizant of in my storytelling, and I think it comes from working with children. Like, I mean, I'm at an elementary school today, and I teach my university course tomorrow. Like I'm also a university instructor now in Indigenous studies, and so on Mondays I'm working with kindergarten grade 1s, 2s, and 3s, and then on Tuesdays I'm working with adults who are studying sociology and anthropology, journalism, and pre-law. And so I mean, I'm finding that if I can explain to somebody who's only like 5 and 6 years old about what they're looking at in a sentence or two, and they get it, they're like, oh, and they understand it, then I've succeeded, because I've reached out to the youngest, most non-critical person in the group who actually is still forming their own whole concepts about the world. And I've explained something to them and in a way that they get it, that's not abstract or not conceptual, that's straightforward. And when I apply that same principle to how I explain things to like a sociology major or an anthropology major in their 3rd and 4th year, applying the same principle, it still works. And I'll explain to them what it is we're looking at and why we're doing it. They're like, oh, okay. And it's communication, right? It's like how we communicate is so important. And so like, that's kind of like how I test it. It's like, well, if I can explain that to them and this group here, and they all get it, well, that's good. And, I just think that's kind of like that's who I have to be. And I think our role as artists is the ultimate communicator. Like we are like, I also bearing in mind that many of the people who will cross our paths on any given day or who view our work aren't all speaking the same language as their mother tongue. We're not in that situation on this land anymore. And it's a very global perspective. So the less words you use to show what is being presented to people, and they can understand it in whatever language they're speaking, I think the more appeal you're going to get for the work. And I think it's so important.
I'll take a smile when they look at my image and I'm walking away knowing that there's something that touched them. They understood something in what I captured. Than having someone sit there for 5 minutes trying to read a book about what it means to me. Yeah. Because in reality, as someone who wants his work in front of others, we don't want to make it difficult. Like you said, we
Yeah.
want to make it easy. We want to make it so they enjoy the moment. They move on to the next. They enjoy the moment, and then later on, maybe they reflect on it, or they go, "Man, I really like that image. I wonder if I can purchase that."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Cool to see that we have the same philosophy, and that we both want to see the next generation just really just take on a whole new light, take on the pride again, take on helping uplift their communities, finding a reason to uplift through art, through hands-on experience, through teachings. There's just so much.
Yeah, there is. There's so much. I was just thinking, so last year I did this really amazing mural at Kwantlen Polytechnic University in their library, and I collaborated with these two incredibly talented American artists. One was Desimundo from Chicago, now based in Oakland, and Chilean-born artist Pancho Pascador, now based in Oakland. And we collaborated on this 25-foot high mural in the library at Kwantlen Polytechnic University. And it's in their big atrium, and it's just this massive vertical piece, and it's just very monumental. And I remember sitting, because there's 3 levels in the library with like 3 study areas, and I went and sat on the 2nd level, and there's a viewing platform that overlooks the art space, so you can kind of sit and just kind of admire it. And so when they after the unveiling and they had it on display, I went to the space to go sit and watch it, and I got to watch how people were reacting to it because they had just installed it. So people would be walking, and then they look up and like, whoa, and like, whoa. And then they would, get their camera out and they'd be like taking their selfies, and then they would come back. There'd be groups of them taking selfies, or, there'd be groups of them with their solidarity fists up in the air, taking photos of themselves in front of it. And like, I sat there for like a good hour. It was like during the lunch hour, I sat there, and I don't often do that. Like, I don't often get to sit in a space to see how people are reacting to my work. And it was the rare occasion that I actually did. And it was just really cool to actually see how people were responding to it. And that for them, it was a spectacle. The way they were photographing it and themselves in front of it was like a spectacle. And one that yes, finally, like they get me or whatever. I felt so accomplished watching people react to it. And, as I'm sitting there were people who were coming up to where in the area that I was sitting with their cameras, and they were taking snapshots, and they were talking about it, and I could hear what they were saying about it, and it was just so flattering to hear the comments that were coming from these groups of people, complete strangers, and really cool. And I thought, okay, you did it. Like, you did what you accomplished. They get it, and it's up to them to decide what they want to do with it. How it makes them feel and how they want to treat it. And I just really felt like that was a success.
Have it on the screen in front of me.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, it's right. I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but it's right.
Oh, cool. Yeah, there it is. Oh, man, that was such a cool project to work on.
Those are the kind of things I'd love to come out and capture. I don't know. I feel like I look at things different than a lot of people.
Yeah.
Especially when I'm looking through the viewfinder. And I'd just love to capture those moments for you as memory, as ways to spread more love for your art and your story. It's so powerful. Like, you look at it and it's just, you feel the power, you feel the energy off of it.
Yeah, it was.
It's incredible.
Thank you. Our whole orientation of it was going to be this very strong vertical orientation. And typically, the format that I'm used to telling my stories are the long horizontal. And I always treat my murals like a cinema. Like I always treat it like, well, like if I was sitting in a theater and viewing this, how would I want this to be seen as as a screen capture? It's kind of how I envision things. And so when I was presented with this, this really vertical concept, I thought, we're going to do this. And the idea was everything in it had to look like it was rising up. It had to look like it was lifting and lifting and lifting and going up and up and up, and giving cues visually so that people could understand that it was about rising. And so like my conception about that was really simple. I'm like, we can use very simple symbols that can achieve that and get that idea across, and very much akin to what the type of art that it really harkens to sort of activist arts, like an activist type of concept to mobilize people to action. Pick a concept that is important. And because we were an all male working crew, it was like, we recognize we are all male, and we have a responsibility to show solidarity to our sisters. We're going to honor that the best way we can, with using our talent the best way we can. And that was just kind of our concept statement, was pretty much just like that. Like it was fairly simple. And I'm so proud of the work we did. And, you know, it led to another project that we did down in Seattle, like in the summer. So this was February last year. And then August, we were commissioned by the city of Seattle to paint a mural. Same group. We were also joined with Lutzl Dene artist Jonas Bige and Stephen Smith, who is from Seattle. He's a very well-known Indigenous artist down there. And it was at 13th and Fur housing development. And
I now have that on the screen.
Oh, cool. and so we get there, and it was sponsored by 206 Zulu, which is a very famous national nonprofit organization created for the betterment of Black empowerment. And they focus on creating creative spaces for disadvantaged Black youth. And some of the projects that they work on are performance, dance, singing, refining, you know, hip hop artists. They have a recording studio, and so across the street from where this mural is being painted is Emerald City Recording Studio, owned by Sir Mix-a-Lot. Because we're being billeted, they're like, you're staying in this hall. It's called Washington Hall. And I had no idea where it was or what it was. You know, I had no clue. And I come upstairs, and so we meet the administrators. They take us upstairs, and we get to the top floor, and then there's all these old photographs all on the walls, and it's all these very famous Black activists: Malcolm X, Muhammad Ali, Martin Luther King. Then there's like Billie Holiday. There's, and then there's all these famous rappers from the 80s and 90s. And I'm like, wow, that's really cool. And then they're like, these are all the people who've been here. These are all the people that have been in this building and have either recorded or performed in the hall downstairs. I go, Malcolm X spoke here? They're like, yeah, he spoke here. And I was like, wow. He was sitting in this office at one time. I was like, oh, that's so cool. And they're like, so this is where you're sleeping. We're like, what? And then they're like, yeah, come on. So they bring us into this recording studio, and there's all these gold records on the wall. And I'm looking at them, and it's all Sir Mix-a-Lot's music. And I was like, are those like actual Sir Mix-a-Lot gold records on the wall? They're like, yeah, those are all his. This is his office. This is his recording studio. I go, no way. They're like, yeah, this is where you're sleeping. They had a cot and sleeping bag and pillow for us to kind of, and like down the hall there's showers and whatever. And they're like, yeah, this is home for you guys while you paint your mural. And I'm like, may I ask where he is? Like, he's in Amsterdam right now, doing some shows in Amsterdam. And I was like, oh wow, that is so cool. And then down the hall in the studio, they were actually recording. So what Sir Mix-a-Lot had done with his studio, partnered with this organization, was helping Black youth get their music recorded and dedicating his studio space to allow them to record their music. It helped them workshop their music too. Like they had rehearsal stages. They had musicians come in to help them hone their music before they went in. It's just amazing. So don't be surprised if we run into the odd, famous recording artist here. And because they all come through here when they come to Seattle for their live shows, they all stop in. They come and meet the youth and all that. So I was like, that is really freaking cool. I was like, wow. I had no idea that was going to happen. So anyway, so we are working on the mural, and I was up on the scaffolding this one day, and I looked down, and there was these guys, and they were like The way they were dressed, I could tell they weren't just regular people walking down the street, just come to check out the mural that was painted in the alley. Like they were just presented themselves in a whole different way than a lot of other people. And and everyone in our work crew stopped working and went down to go shake their hands. I was like, oh man, these guys must be somebody important. And so I get down off the scaffolding to go introduce myself to them, and sure enough, it's Souls of Mischief.
Nice.
And they were in town doing a show for their 30th anniversary, and they came to check out our mural because they were upstairs doing workshops. And I was like, oh man, so it was so cool to meet you guys. Like they were really super nice guys, and they just loved the work they were doing. It's like, yo, you're Indigenous from Canada? I go, yeah. It's like, oh, right on, man. That's solid. Like, that's cool, man. Thanks for coming down here and doing this work and all that. Like, we have a show tonight. We're gonna give you guys some VIP passes to the show. So we get there, we go to the show, and it was at the Crocodile, which is a world famous concert hall in Seattle. Like the who's who of anybody that's ever played in Seattle has played at the Crocodile, like Nirvana, Soundgarden, like every hip hop act that's ever been through there. And that night when they were doing their performance, they stopped and did their shout outs, and they did a shout out to all the people that were in the crowd. And it's a very small venue. I mean, maybe 400 or 500 people max can fit inside the space. Probably about 400 people. It's just really small. But they shout out, Soul J was there, De La Soul was there, and a Tribe Called Quest were all in the crowd, and we got a shout out with them. Our mural crew got a shout out with all of them, all on the same stage.
Brandon was jumping for joy inside.
I was so happy, man. Like I was like, oh my god, no way.
So
yeah, it was really cool.
This is in Seattle.
I was in Seattle, yeah.
So I just interviewed a Latina girl named Roxana Ortiz. She's episode 2.
Yeah.
She's a photojournalist for Como 4 News.
Yep.
She's an Emmy winner.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so she's also up for 3 Emmys this year. Her and her partner have a business called Raw Plus Seattle. What they do is they're trying to create a space for people of color. Whether it's creatively through poetry or photography, so they don't have to worry about gear. They don't have to worry about computers. What they're trying to do is just build a space for these people can come and be creative. I don't know. I think I might touch base with them and see if they know about this 206 Zulu, because they're in the same community, and why not try to connect everybody so everybody can work together.
I agree.
First, mental health. Mental health is super important.
Oh yeah.
Trying to find a solid structure to feel good about who you are and where you are. How do you find your mental health and your art are connected?
Oh, they are very much connected. So, I mean, I've been through the gamut in my life with my mental health. Having gone through various stages of trauma throughout childhood, and those traumas were very impactful on my quality of life as a child, even my ability to socialize, my ability to look after my personal hygiene, even when I was a child, right to how I made friends, my adolescence when I was a high school student, my development of addictions to various substances very early on in my life, and not having a support network or a support person to be able to help me identify these problems or these issues, or having anyone telling me that what I was going through was a normal process given the circumstances that I was faced with, and dealing with all kinds of stigmas around not having somebody to help me diagnose what I was going through. And so I went through all kinds of various stages of depression, PTSD, and more recently I struggled with what I didn't know that I was struggling with was ADHD. And I think because I'm an artist, I'm able to juggle lots of things that ADHD can hide very well in artists and go treated unchecked. But there's just been so many different layers of struggles that I've had over the decades with my mental health that I had to ask for help. And for a long time, I never knew that you could ask for help. I remember, I suffered a great deal of tragic losses, like relationships and friendships that, or businesses or jobs that ended because there was no support, or I thought there was no support, and I didn't know there was support, or there was treatments, or things like that, or therapies and things like that, or ceremony and or cultural models and approaches to help us cope with these. And so it's been a long journey. Like, it's been arduous, and it's been as much of a challenge as any other challenge I faced in my life. And I've been through treatment programs. I'm still continuing to be part of support groups, which are important. Having a community of support is so important. I've been in therapy for 8 years. It's my 8th year of therapy, and I've had 3 different therapists. And my 3rd therapist, I chose to find somebody that was a match who could challenge me. Like, not that I could go to tell when I was having a bad day, but actually get into the sort of the mechanisms of what's going on in my life and have it explained, but also being challenged, like given tasks to do in my day-to-day life that could help meet the challenges so that I could deal with these complex issues that I've been faced with. And it's huge. Like, it's just, I don't think anybody can do it alone. And I actually think that anyone who's ever made it, anybody who's ever been a success, likely has a support network that's dynamic, that you don't see, that's helping them process the magnanimous issues that they're faced with daily.
Thank you for saying that therapy is a good thing. I struggle with letting myself speak to a therapist, and it's to my own detriment. I feel like now that I'm getting more confident in who I am as a person, and that should go to everybody. I'm almost 50 years old, and I'm finally feeling comfortable with who I am. So speaking to a therapist, having a community of supportive people around you, that's kind of goes with what my podcast is based on. I use the hashtag community over competition, because in the end, if I can build a community of like-minded individuals, that we all help each other.
Yeah.
You have a job, or you find a job that comes up, but you're too busy, then in that community, you have someone else who can be like, you know what, I can't make it, but I know someone who can. You can share responsibilities, you can share thoughts, you can share worries, you can share, just being okay to share and be open. Again, Brandon, I want to thank you for coming on. It means a lot. I thought of you when I first started. I had a short list of people that I needed to come on and speak to, because I know I've told you in the past how important you giving me those words were, but I felt like it deserves something bigger, because being lost most of your life, being in a space where, yes, I was loved by my adoptive parents, but I didn't have a sense of community or connection, and being told not to give up hope. I mean, it's out there. It's going to come when it comes. Throwing it in the wind and letting it just come back to me naturally was an important thing to learn. And I'm here now. So I look forward to sitting down and chatting to you more about my idea and your mentorship program. Mm-hmm. I would love to, when you have murals in these events, I would love to come and capture the behind the scenes.
I'd love to have you. There's a couple that are coming up.
So again, you're very inspirational. Your story will touch many people. Kwantlen's been important to me since 2014. I didn't know much about it, but that moment that we shared on that bridge, and the communication we've had and things like that has made Kwantlen a very important part of my being. So again, thank you. Thank you for giving me the time. Thank you for sharing your art with the world, because the world is better knowing that art is out there.
Thank you for saying that.
No, man,
Thank you for saying that.
Any projects you can talk about real quick before we button up here? Anything coming up in the near
future?
I
mean, I think a couple things too about this whole, like, before I end with that, what you're saying about, like this whole thing with mental health, and having a support network. And I think, I think what I've come to know is that, I mean, I think I know the importance of ceremony. I think I believe that ceremony is important. And I believe everyone deserves to feel good after they've been through something horrendous. That the reward is after all that, after you've processed all that, that you deserve to come to a clearing emotionally and holistically that's going to help you so that you can cope and feel the desire to keep moving forward. And so often what presents itself for a lot of us is somewhere in that equation, it stops for some people where they don't get to that place where they can feel good about something, or they don't get to that place of where they've processed their healing or their trauma enough to come to the clearing. And life is just a constant battle all the time. And it's just, I get it because I've been through it. Like I've been through so many times in my life, I've come up against feelings of hopelessness or giving up. I've done it so many times. Like it just happens. And, but so many times I've also been shown these really amazing things, occurrences or people and places that have happened that change all that. And I'm just grateful for that. But I remember when I first made my choice to make it, like before I became an artist full time, I had other jobs that I used to do. Like I was a housemaker once. I was a deckhand on a fishing boat. I was a business, like a project manager for a business. I used to be a landscaper. I used to mow lawns. Like I did like all kinds of other things. Like I did demolition, like construction demolition. God, there was just things that I used to do all the time. But I remember when I made the choice to become an artist, I remember it was like, I'm going to do this. Like, this is going to be the thing I'm going to do. And I'm going to do it at all costs. No matter how hard it gets, I'm going to do it. And there's been hard times. And I'm glad I never gave up. And so I just wanted to say that, like, don't give up. If you're struggling, don't give up. There's always people out there that are willing to help. And they're great resources. They can help people get from A to B and to the next steps that they need to go in their lives to overcome these horrendous situations that can become debilitating for a lot of people just to even get out of bed every day. I get it. I've been there, and I'm grateful for those people, and they're there. And so, I think that's a big part of my story. It's huge. I wouldn't be able to tell my art stories without telling that story. It's all part of it. And I'm not ashamed of it. I'm not ashamed to talk about addictions. I'm not ashamed to talk about trauma. I'm not ashamed to talk about where it led me and what that all was like. I've also come to love who I've been, all those different stages, and that's important. It's like, okay, well, that was a tough time, but I love that guy. He was a good guy. There were some really crazy things that were going on then, but I loved who that guy was at that stage and that part of my life. And I still do, and I have to so that I can move on. And so that's important. And so, but there's a couple projects that I'm working on right now. And so I'm just wrapping up a year-long residency at Langley Secondary School where I created a massive three-piece sculpture that's going in the main atrium of their building. It's this massive longhouse facade with this huge Thunderbird sculpture that's being positioned in front of the archway of their gym. It's huge, and I think it's going to be like the next big thing in Langley, like for public art. It'll be a showpiece for public art in Langley, period. I'm also I was one of 5 artists that was selected to have their work put inside the new SkyTrain carts that are going to be replacing the old SkyTrains. So there's going to be 50 new SkyTrain trains in the Lower Mainland and the whole line. And my artwork is going to be in all of them. So that's a big project I'm working on.
You should do some kind of like find my image on a SkyTrain, send me a photo and win something. It would just be kind of cool to see.
That is a cool idea. That is a cool idea.
Just to see how many people would do it. I did that with a photo in Fort Langley. Because in Cranberries Naturally, I took a photo of her sign.
Yes.
and it's across from your amazing
Yeah.
mural.
Yeah.
And I just did a post. I was like, find my sign, and I'll provide you a photo.
Oh, nice.
And it was neat. It wasn't a lot of people because I was pretty new at the time, but it was like 30 or 40 people that found it, and it was such a cool.
I remember she was just raving about it because I know the owner.
Yeah, it was such a cool experience.
Very cool.
So I think you should do something like that. I think
I would love to
have some fun, right? And
just,
it could be, you could do whatever you wanted with it, but I think hashtag Brandon's art.
I would love to. So, there's another project I'm doing. There's a company called Orion Construction, and they're building a new headquarters in Langley. And so that sculpture piece that I just did at the corner of 56th and 200th Street in Langley City was the first of 4 major sculptural works that are going to go into that entire location.
Oh, nice.
And so that whole building and all of the surrounding infrastructure are going to have my artwork on it. So it's kind of going to be like my Sistine Chapel of my work it's going to be huge. So that's coming up. And I have another project coming up in Seattle this summer. There's another mural that I'm going to be doing. That's going to be another massive project, and less talked about, or I'm not able to say specifically, but I'm doing production design for two streaming TV shows, one being produced in Washington State and one in Vancouver. And so I'm going to be involved in some film production as well. So lots of stuff going on.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love the fact you get to do what you love every single day. And that's where it shows the struggles when you feel like you can't go on. That's usually when you're 2 seconds from greatness. You get to that point where you want to quit, you want to turn around.
Yeah.
And it would have been one more step or 2 more steps, and you hit that plateau you talked about.
Yeah.
We'll have to touch base. I'll email you my information, my phone number, and everything. Because I would love to get in and capture these behind the scenes moments that people aren't going to see of your mural creation.
Yes.
To the final product. Love to talk to you more about the potential of getting some cameras in hands of some youth and some communities.
Let's talk about it. Yeah.
Because I think all it takes is one click can change the world. So again, Brandon, I truly appreciate the last 2 hours.
Same here.
It's gone by so quick.
I know. It's been time well spent. I never thought that I would get into the story as much as I did. But thank you for providing the space. And I wish you the best of luck on this.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
I want to provide this to all Indigenous creatives. So anybody you may know that needs an outlet or has a project that's coming out and would like to come on and discuss it, by all means, I'm ready for it. People that are just new and they just want to get the jitters out. I try to be easy to talk to, so I'd love to help. So whatever I can do to help and start feeling more like I'm contributing to our communities, I'm all for it.
All right.
Awesome.
I'm in too.